One of the most annoying questions I get is why is Canada importing dictator oil? Why is it importing foreign oil? Why doesn't it use good Canadian oil out in Eastern Canada, which is where all the imports are? I'm going to explain it to you. There's no conspiracy here. This is just distance and logistics. You'll see this chart that I got from the Canadian government, Canadian Energy Regulator. It's 2023 data, but I checked and the 2024 data hasn't changed much at all. So we'll just use this one. Where does Canada's oil come from? It's imported oil, which is in Ontario, Quebec, and then the Maritime provinces. Well, look at the 2023 numbers. That dark blue column there, that's the United States. And the United States makes up 73% of all oil that Canada imports. The next one is Nigeria, which I guess arguably is a dictatorship or an autocratic government, and it makes up 13%. And then there's the Saudi government, which is run by the the royal family, and so it is arguably a dictatorship, and it's 11%. And then we have way down at the bottom, you've got for the last 3 or 4%, you've got Colombia and the United Kingdom. So that's where our oil comes from. And then the question becomes, well, why don't we just replace it? Now, Donald Trump is threatening a 10% tariff on all of the Canadian oil that the United States imports. So this would seem like a 490,000 barrel a day market that Western Canada could serve in Eastern Canada. Well, there's a whole lot of reasons. One is the only source of supply that could be expanded, in particular, get up to 490,000 barrels, is the oil sands. And the oil sands produces ultra heavy sour crude. And the reason it sends it down into the United States instead of east over into Montreal and Quebec, maybe the Maritimes, is because refineries require very special kit called cokers and other equipment that they have to reconfigure their refineries so it can run heavy crude. Which, I mean, it comes out of the ground, it's like peanut butter, right? And you have to dilute it with light hydrocarbons just to get it to run in a pipeline. So this stuff requires a special investments. It's billions of dollars that it takes in a refinery to run this heavy crude, and the Eastern refineries haven't shown any interest in doing that. And why would they? The after 2008 and the explosion in the rapid growth in the American shale industry, they can import oil by pipeline from places like Pennsylvania, maybe even Texas. And it's still closer and it's still cheaper. And distance is a big issue here. So I got the distances just for comparison. So if you're going to go from Calgary to Toronto, 3,400 kilometers. Calgary to Montreal, 3,600 kilometers. Calgary to St. John's, Newfoundland, where apparently there is an Irving refinery that can do some heavy crude, 6,130 kilometers. Whereas if you and by the way, the that assuming that you were just worried about domestic demand, but the Energy East project, which got canceled in 2017, was also meant to export out of St. John's, and it would send oil over to Europe, but even OPEC's modeling shows that Europe's oil consumption is going to decline because they're electrifying their transportation sector. So all the growth that's worth talking about is out in Asia, which means you go to the West Coast. And, it's 1,150 kilometers. That makes a lot of sense. You go like the Trans Mountain expansion. You go from Hardisty, Alberta to Burnaby, where there's a terminal. And maybe you go to north. There'd be a lot of legislative changes because tanker traffic in the Northwest BC passage, that's banned by federal legislation. In fact, there was a de facto agreement that I think since the early 70s not to go there. But nevertheless, I mean, it would be if you were going to export more, that's where you would send it. So here's where we're at. It just doesn't pay to ship or to build a pipeline out to the East Coast, or even to Quebec, to service the Eastern Canadian crude oil market. It just doesn't make sense. And that's why nobody's done it. But there's some other risk factors here. So let's go over them. One is there aren't any pipeline companies interested in doing oil pipelines anymore, not in Canada for sure. And one of the reasons why is high cost. Now, we saw the Trans Mountain expansion, which just went into service here not long ago. The federal government had to buy it, and a crown corporation had to build it. And the capital budget went from 5.7 billion to 34 billion dollars. Now, there were reasons for that. COVID intervened, and there were other pipelines being constructed, which drove up construction costs. And then there were some weather-related issues because BC got hit with some atmospheric rivers, caused flooding. So maybe it was lower than that. Fine, fair enough. But it's still expensive. That's the problem. And political opposition. I mean, we're seeing the oil industry say, streamline a new pipeline. Well, Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution says Aboriginal communities must be consulted. And we saw with TMX in 2019, Aboriginal communities took the company to Trans Mountain to court, and the Supreme Court agreed. It said, you haven't done a good job consulting. Go away and redo it and come back and we'll think about it. And they did. It took them 9 months. This is a very difficult process because you have to propose it, you have to review it, you have to do the environmental impact assessment or review the assessment that the company does, you have to do consultations, you have to deal with all the political opposition. There's lots to do. Building a pipeline is not a simple thing. So it ain't going to get done in a hurry. And that brings me to the next point. There is zero discussion in this country, and I'm talking about Canada, about the effects of the energy transition and peak oil demand. And that's a major risk factor. I'm not saying you can't, even 5 years out is still a little bit risky in this because we're talking, peak demand, OPEC models, growth after 2030, IEA, and tons of other agencies that I could name model peak demand in 2030. The IEA says most likely to decline after that. So if you were an oil producing region, why would you spend all that money to build a pipeline when demand, your market, might be shrinking? And that's a major risk factor. Well, you can see why the pipeline companies aren't interested. They see a much more robust future for natural gas for a whole variety of reasons. So that's where they want to focus. It makes perfect sense. So, in conclusion, stop saying that we need to replace imported oil in Eastern Canada. Stop saying that it's dictator oil that we're importing. And I guess if you think Donald Trump is heading towards being a king or a dictator, then maybe you make that argument. But for now, we'll just assume that it's not and is still a democracy. And stop saying nonsense like, we're importing Russian oil. We haven't imported Russian oil for a long time. We used to, back in 2010. You can see some of it in the chart that I posted earlier. There's a very good reason why we shouldn't worry about the 490,000 barrels and probably declining that Eastern Canada, just let it go.
Thanks for watching the show. We are on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers and over 1 million views. If you're enjoying the content, give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for being part of our community.